Welcome to the Myth and Magic Authors Podcast, folklore and fantasy topics aimed at creative storytellers. To write stories and challenge your brain with exciting ideas, delve into these presentations and reflections. See how fantasy realms are based on actual world history, legend, and lore. Study fairy tales, nature fables, and supernaturalism to engage in a jumble of concepts that will trigger your fancy and get you writing imaginatively. Now, here's your host, Neil Mack.
Hello, fantasy fiction fans, and welcome to Myth and Magic, the podcast for fantasy authors everywhere. And I know you're busy because I'm busy. We're all busy. We're busy creating, imagining, writing, thinking, fabulizing our plots and our stories. But I don't think anybody's quite as busy as my next guest, because today I've got the delight to chat to Sophy Layzell. Sophie's from Somerset in England, an area which is steeped in mythology and fairy tales. In fact, as you all know, it's where the Arthurian legends come alive. And she's been prepping her book Upon All Men, and I think she'll be asking for some art readers to help with some beta editions. But I'm very interested in talking to Sophie because she's got a very touching story about how she came into the world of authorship. She's writing Measure of the Days, that revolves around obtaining a vital component for a vaccine to remedy a pandemic, and it's all set in a dystopian world. So we talk about dystopia for a bit, but it's quite interesting because she covers themes like pandemics, vaccines, anti-vaxxers, and even suspicions about science and the motives of governments. And she focuses on what it's like for an ordinary citizen who's been forced into defiance, really, trying to defy the big powers around during a medical scare. But amazingly, she wrote this Measure of Days long before our COVID-19 pandemic situation. So I want to talk to her about that, about how she actually handled an idea of a novel set in a post-pandemic world. Without further ado, let's go over to Sophie in Somerset.
Hello.
Hello, Neil.
Hello, Sophie. So before I start, let me just ask you an important point. Is it Layzell or is it Layzell, as in rhyming with hazel?
Well, it doesn't really matter. It depends whether you're from Somerset or not. So Somersetians say Layzell, like to rhyme with hazel, but yeah. Other people tend to say Layzell. But it really, I don't mind. I respond to both.
It's lovely to have you on the show. So first of all, big thanks for chatting with me here on Myth and Magic, which is the podcast for fantasy fiction authors. As I know very well, you're extremely busy. You have 1,000,001 things going on all the time. Not least, you're prepping your book, I think, for which is called Upon All Men. Is that right?
That's right, yes.
And you'll be asking maybe for some help a bit later on because you're looking for some ARC readers to step forward who might be able to help with reading some beta editions. Is that right?
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah, great. We'll talk about Upon All Men a little bit later on, but let's just talk about you to start with and find out a bit about you. So you've already said you're based in Somerset, is that how you say it? In England.
Although I'm a newcomer, I'm an incomer. So I don't know how long you have to live here before you can claim to be a Somersetian. I've only been here about 25 years, so it's an adopted home, really.
So you weren't born in Somerset? But
No, I was born in Laos. I was born right round the other side of the world, and I was adopted here when I was 3 months old. And my adopted family lived in London and then came down to Gloucestershire. And then it's not until I was sort of early 20s, I came here.
But Somerset is almost world-renowned as being a mythical and magical place. For example, you've got the Glastonbury tour there, haven't you? And You've got the Arthurian legends. Did you feel that you were living in a place which was fairy tale-like?
I don't think I was clearly aware in the beginning. It's something that you have to be ready and open for. I think it has to be something that's in you that you then welcome. But I certainly became more aware of certain places I suppose, after my daughter died, so my eldest daughter,
Yeah.
and being outside and walking through ancient woodlands was probably the most important part of my grief process. And it's really then that I became aware of all the little things, the rustling of the leaves, the changing of the seasons. So yes, it's a relatively new revelation for me.
Yeah. So how many daughters have you got?
I had 2, now I have 1 lovely one.
And what about sons? How many sons have you got?
No, I have no sons.
Oh, yeah,
And
no.
I always thought when I was younger that I would only have boys. It was one of those weird things, when you're sort of a teenager and thinking about children. I thought, I'm only going to have boys. I only want boys.
Yeah.
And I was convinced actually that my second, who's called Amelia, I was convinced when I was carrying her that she was a boy, and went so far as to bag up all the clothes in bin liners, ready to throw them out because I said, I'm not going to need them. I'm having a boy.
Wow. The world and nature and God can play these tricks on us. So the daughter that you were just talking about is Jemima, is it?
Yes. So Jemima was my eldest, and she's the one who died very unexpectedly. She was 12. That was 9 years ago now.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So is that why you set up the Jemima Layzell Trust?
Yes, absolutely.
So would you like to just tell listeners a little bit about that before we go on to talking about the fiction?
Of course. So Jemima died in quite unusual circumstances. She was left brain dead following a burst aneurysm in her brain. And this meant that she was in quite a unique position to donate her organs. We agreed to that because we knew that she herself was keen, because we'd happened to have a discussion about it before her death very randomly. And so after agreeing, we obviously went home, tried to carry on with our life, but then heard much later that the donations had been successful, and not just successful, but that her gift was a sort of a record. She was the record holder for the most recipients. So I think she still is, not just because of her organs, but also she donated her corneas and her liver stem cells, and they continue to be useful because they can regenerate, and you can keep using them.
Yeah.
So this kind of unusual and extraordinary legacy meant that we felt a responsibility to champion organ transplants.
Yeah.
And also, because I'd put her diaries into a book, we had a small amount of revenue that I felt needed to be spent responsibly. And so the trust was set up to be able to fund children like Jemima who have a brain injury and are recovering and need special treatment or special equipment to help them.
Yeah.
And so parents and medical professionals can apply to us, and we are always very, very happy to be able to do a little bit just to help their recovery.
Wow. So blessings really have come from this tragedy.
Yes. Yeah, they have.
Well, that's an extraordinary story. Thank you for that. So you grew up in that area, West Country, we call it in England. And I understand, reading from your biography, that you do remember the adventures of Tintin being read to you by your brother. Is that right?
Yes. They were just the best days. I mean, remember so well just lying on our tummies in the garden and him reading with such enthusiasm and passion, because even now he still loves them, and he would give them such voice and character, and yeah, it's just one of the best memories. Yeah, he was 18 when I was adopted.
Oh, wow.
And so I have 2 brothers, 2 older brothers, and the other was 20.
So can you remember what other fantasy fictions possibly inspired you at a very young age, not only just because you enjoyed them, but also it perhaps triggered a desire in you to write one day?
Well, that's the funny thing. I never did have a desire to be a writer.
Right.
I grew up wanting to be an artist or a fashion designer. And I obviously read a huge deal because we had no television. So yes, I spent a lot of time reading, and I did enjoy creative writing hugely, but it wasn't my main focus. My main focus was art. But if I think about, there's been so many books, and I had very old-fashioned parents. So most of the books were sort of classics and very well known. But I was thinking the other day about a book that was hugely influential. It was called Masquerade, and it was an illustrated book full of these quite fantastical pictures of hares, and it ended up being a kind of treasure hunt. Do you remember it?
I do remember it.
Yes.
It had a whole load of surreal pictures inside it.
Yes, and it just set the nation on fire, going crazy, looking with their metal detectors, going around the country trying to find this treasure. And I remember that book being very important. And then that then led to other illustrations. So partly, I suppose, visual side for me was just as important as the written word. And then Arthur Rackham then became a favourite illustrator, loved all those fairy stories.
Yeah.
So yes, I suppose, it was partly the drawings, the illustrations, and the links that they then had to the stories that I was reading.
I think the part of the creative process is about sitting there, relaxing and visualizing. And I think because you're coming from a visual place, that you're picturing something, then perhaps you're writing from that visualization. I think that's quite an interesting way to think about writing fiction.
I don't think I'm alone. I think there's quite a few people who I've met, not in person, but online, who certainly do sketches of their characters. And I know that maps of worlds, particularly imagined worlds, are really important to get that story right, and also to then give an extra bit of background for the reader. Definitely.
It seems clear to me a writer is not a thing which just stands on its own. I think a writer is a creative person. And you often find that there's a whole load of other strings to the writer's bow. I mean, for example, with you, you've got you're still doing your art, but you do your theatre workshops and that sort of thing. You've got a whole load of things going on. Everybody I speak to does do a little bit. I do art in the evenings because I think it's important to take your eyes and your fingers away from writing, but try to be creative. But you've been doing this theatre workshops for children aged 6 to 16, is that right?
Yes, I've been doing them for quite a while.
Yeah.
I started off working in the local youth theatre in Taunton and in schools. And then I started up my own theatre company.
Wow.
And I have to say, I haven't done a lot of work with young people now for a year, obviously, because of lockdown.
Yeah.
And now that we've started back, it's a tiny group because our hall size where we are, how many we have.
Yeah.
But it's lovely. We've only been back 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm also very lucky because I have a young assistant who I have to admit has done most of the work, and she's been fantastic. So I feel very cautious about it because it's been so long. You do lose confidence. And because I don't live with a young little person anymore.
Yeah.
You go back and I can't. It's just getting back into that frame of mind and remembering all those different ways that you can connect with them, and it's taking a while, to get back.
I agree.
But I am planning some for older children, and again, I'm not going to be the primary leader. I've got a fantastic director, a professional director, who's going to be working with age 13 and up, and we've got 3 different workshops planned, but all using the same script. So this is my first full-length musical that I've written on my own. Not the music side, but the script.
Yeah.
And the idea is to work with these young people to help fully develop it so that I can see whether things are working, whether the message that I want to get across is actually coming loud and clear, so that the composer can see what works. And then with luck, we'll go take away what we can from these sessions and then go back and rewrite, and then with luck actually put it on as a show next year.
Wow. What's the name of that musical?
It's called Havisham. So it's based on Miss Havisham's story.
Oh, yeah, Dickens.
Yeah, so it's before Pip meets her in Great Expectations.
Wow, that sounds really exciting. You'll have to come and tell us about how you get on with that. That sounds really interesting. Especially that you've written the script. So in opera, they call that the recitative, the bit in between the songs. Is that right?
Oh, right. I don't know what you call it in musical. But yes, I've written the script and the lyrics, and I have a lovely friend who's doing all the compositions, which seem very complicated. I wouldn't have a clue where to begin with that. I did try and join a sing-along when he first brought some music to us, and I couldn't keep up. It was awful. So yeah, he's really good, and it sounds amazing. So very excited about that.
Wow, that sounds fantastic. So we've talked about those sort of things. So how did you actually start writing then? Because I read on your biography that you started to edit your old stories while you were running a vintage clothing and a recycled art store. Is that kind of when you first started putting things together in your mind and starting to
That's
write?
the first time I sat down to do it properly.
Yeah.
So I'd already started some stories back in 2015, but I have to say that writing is a new thing and has only really developed purely because, I suppose, of Jemima, because I put her stories together.
Yeah.
And then found I had to start writing things like the charity constitution. Then you have to document everything.
Yeah.
And although that's useful and a good discipline to try and communicate and justify everything that you're doing, it's not very creative.
Yeah.
And I also started to put down feelings and just little things I'd noticed and things that were helping me, work through where I was in thinking about her. And that's when I started to go to a creative writing workshop.
Yeah.
And began these stories, but I didn't really finish them. And then, yes, as you say, I was in this lovely shop that I was part of for a short period of time, and there were long hours where nothing was happening. And I thought, this is the perfect time. It's quiet, it's a creative space, there's lovely people. I'm going to finish these, re-edit them, get them ready, and be brave enough to invite friends to read them. So it's all been very kind of slow process.
Yeah.
So I finally finished them in, I think it was summer of 2019, and finished one and put it up on Create Space, which is the Amazon Kindle application, just so that people could download it for free. I couldn't think how else to give it to people. It's very hard, isn't it, to work out when you're new and you know nothing about writing. How do you get your book to your friend miles away in a readable format? You don't want to give them a PDF that they then have to sit at their laptop and and scroll through. And that worked. There was a great deal of silence about it as well, which I remember thinking, oh dear.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced.
Yeah, 20 friends have downloaded it. They haven't told me who they are. No one's saying anything.
Yeah, it's very nerve-wracking.
Yeah, so it's that awful moment. But then a few people who admitted they'd read it then came forward and were actually so nice about it that I felt encouraged enough to try and get it published properly. But yes, what's happened to all those others that didn't say anything, I don't know.
So was that a Measure of the Days, or was that?
Yes, Measure of Days. So that's the very first in the trilogy. So it's a trilogy that came together in a very odd way. And since writing them, my writing methods are very different. And yes, it's the first of this sci-fi adventure, which actually what I find quite interesting, because I've been listening to your podcasts, particularly about dystopia and what is a dystopian book. And when I was writing my novel, I didn't even really think what category my book came into. You just write, don't you? You have a story.
Why should you actually worry about what it's? If you're an artist, all you do is create your art. You don't care about how somebody's going to put it in a pigeonhole, do you?
Yes. So when it came to publishing it and they asked me, what do you think your book is? I said sci-fi, purely because it's set in an imagined future, and technically the prosthetics that people rely on in my book would be so sophisticated and they're so extraordinary in how they enhance people's disabilities. Not enhance them, but compensate for them.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, it's sci-fi. It must be a sci-fi book. So now it's classified as a sci-fi. Probably it is a dystopian novel, but I hadn't thought about that at the time. And I was trying to think, what does dystopia mean? How do you classify it? It's it's so sort of broad, isn't it? But I read somewhere that I think the easiest way to describe it is it's the opposite of utopia.
Exactly.
So you've got this idyllic, lovely, so-called perfect world, and then this is the opposite, where things are difficult. People are struggling. There has to be some kind of force, doesn't there, that people are striving to overcome. And so my book fits into that.
I suppose real life is in the middle, so that you've got utopia at one end, dystopia down the other, and we live in the middle.
Yes, but we can find both. It depends, I think, on our outlook.
Yeah, that's true. And in this novel, there are suggestions of pandemics and vaccines and anti-vaxxers and that sort of stuff.
I know, and if I'd known that what was coming, I don't know that I would have, dwelt on such terrible things. But at the time, because I started it in 2015, it was a world away. It's quite extraordinary. And also the timing, again, when I sent it to the publishers, it was before all of this.
Yeah.
And then it came out in August last year, sort of right in the middle, just as we thought, foolishly, that we were coming out of it.
I know.
And there's been quite a few other friends who've got similar novels, and they found it very hard. I mean, how do you market something so close to the bone? It's very difficult. But I think from feedback I've had, that although my book is challenging in some ways, it's still escapism, because it's very different. The situation is very different, and because it's sort of so character driven, I think people haven't found it depressing. Yeah. Whereas I do know there are some similar novels, and people have, because there have been references to COVID-19 in their books, they found them quite hard.
Yeah. So your protagonist is Dita Edison, is that right?
Yes, that's right. She's a girl, and it's short for something which,
right.
If you read it, you will find out what it's short for. So yes, she and although the story centres around her, she's only part of it. So I wrote it thinking, imagine this terrible situation and this absolutely disastrous disease. How would people respond? And I was trying to think of all the different responses. So you've got the people who would exploit the situation.
Yeah.
The disaster capitalists, the people who will try and make money.
Yeah.
As well as the people who are trying to solve it in their different ways, even though they might not come at it from the same viewpoints. Everyone thinks they're right, don't they? And then this girl who's in the middle of it, who hasn't really, who was completely unaware of what was going on, but finds herself vitally important. So she's in the middle, but there are many other viewpoints throughout the story. And in many ways, she's the least coloured in, if you like.
Yeah.
Partly because of her naivety and her age. So she's a sort of blank foil, if you like, for all the other quite strong, dominant characters that she finds herself pulled between.
Did you find her difficult to write as a character?
No, I didn't find her difficult, but I found her sort of the least interesting, if you like. There are many other characters that I love a great deal more.
So you certainly didn't identify with her?
No, not really. She was just a catalyst, she's just the reason for the story.
Very interesting. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. I'm definitely going to. And I guess Upon All Men is book 2 then in the series.
Yes. So they are very much one story. So there's 3 books, and they are a continuation, and they were written pretty much together.
Right. So you've written all 3, have you?
Yes, all 3. I sort of knew what was happening, and there were only very few things I had to go back and change. Mainly names. I find names incredibly difficult.
So in this book, Upon All Men, they go to the Isles of Desolation, don't they?
They do, yes. And obviously I haven't been. One of the great things about a futuristic fantasy novel is it can be, it can be inaccurate, because who knows what it will be in 600 years. But it is still completely isolated and very, very lonely.
So it's in the South Atlantic, is it?
Yeah. So you kind of go, if you look at go all the way around the world and then down a bit. Yeah. So I sort of imagined that to travel there, it would take, a couple of months by boat, if not more.
Yeah.
But I'm also imagining that boats are more sophisticated than they are now and a little faster. So it's all that kind of thing, trying to think how will they get there.
Yeah.
But it's really a chance for characters to take stock, and the place that they end up is called the Sanctum. It's a laboratory, and it's a moment for Dita to kind of gather all the information about things that have happened to her before, take stock, and then it's sort of like from there they're then propelled back into the action. So it's just a moment of thinking and then a moment of assessing. Plus, there's also unexpected people there. So yes, it's really fun, actually. My book, I think. I hope people think it's funny, and it's not to be taken seriously.
Did you realise that that was a period of isolation that she was either forced into going to, or she, obviously went of her own choice? But there's a containment and separation there, which was similar to what we've all been through in the last 12 months.
Yes, absolutely. Obviously not deliberate. I wrote it ages ago, but yes, no, and also yes, the desolation isles. Where else could you be more isolated? So yeah, who knows what was going on in my brain, but it's worked in my novel, and it's an important part of the novel. So I'm happy with it.
So that is the book that you're asking for some art reviews for, is it? Upon All Men?
Yes. Now I'm waiting for a publishing date.
Yeah.
I've been waiting a while. Meanwhile, I don't like sitting idle, and I believe that it's quite important to get people to start talking about your book.
Yeah.
Even before it's got a date. So yes, I've already got quite a few lovely bloggers and reviewers who are looking at it right now, and I really would love some more. Part of the thing that I'm interested in finding out is, does it stand on its own?
Yeah.
And so far, one person has come back and said, yes, she's read it all. It made perfect sense, but you do need to know the premise.
Yeah. How can people get in touch with you for that?
If they go onto my website, which is sophielayzell.com, and message me, or if they go onto any of the social media platforms, so I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that's me, there's no high-powered agent, then I will obviously get back to them, and then if they send me their email, I can send them PDF copies, which I think you can email to your Kindle.
So we've talked about that you are involved in the fine arts still, i.e. artwork, and you do some lino prints, is that right?
Yeah, yes, this is a rather unexpected development for me. My husband runs a building firm, right, and every year we send out Christmas cards. And this year, instead of sort of buying generic ones, as we often do, I thought I'm going to, we're locked down again, I'm going to make them.
Yeah.
And remembered back to my childhood with my brother, the same brother who used to read Tintin. He's an artist. He's a very famous artist, actually. He used to do lino cuts every year for Christmas. Yeah. And I thought, how hard can it be? So I bought a little kit and instantly became absolutely hooked on it. Sometimes my work's a little precious, and with the marks that you make on the lino, because you can't always control it or predict them, and you also can't see how it's going to be until you finally make that print, I find it works very well for my style. And it's also quite quick, so you get instant gratification. But at the same time, it can be as challenging as you like, because you can obviously do as complex a design as you like. And I've now started to do reduction lino printing, which is keeping me busy. So you start off only carving away what you want to remain as white. Using the same block, you then cut away the next, print again. And it's a gamble, because you've got to line everything up. So I did something like 10 prints, only one of which so far has lined up. And I've still got a third colour to add. So it's like, oh no, it could have all been for nothing. But I really love that kind of challenge. So that's how I started to do them. And then I thought, actually, my work, I would love to incorporate some pictures in my work.
Like book plates.
My book, yes. So I've got 2 books that are currently with an editor, and one of them I think would work well with some little black linos, and I'm thinking of self-publishing that one.
What is that one?
This book has not got a proper title.
Okay.
I keep changing my mind. The working title is Bird's Eye. So anyone who's been following me on social media will know it as Bird's Eye. And it's probably the book that's most me, in that there's a character, Catherine, who has lost a daughter, and a lot of her grief is my grief. And also, talking of nature and magic places, she goes up to Corfe Castle, which is near me.
Yeah. And
spends hours just walking, getting lost with her dog. And so that magic I felt, she feels. And yes, it's all about this family. And there's also a slightly paranormal element to it. But yes, so that's I don't know when that'll come out. Obviously, when I feel I can, and when I'm ready, and when I feel I've learned enough about self-publishing, which is a whole...
It's another whole career.
Another whole game.
So what sort of lino cuts would you do for that then? So would you do nature or castle?
Yes, so I've already done quite a few. They're little, so there's a blackbird who's a motif throughout the book.
Right.
So I have a little image of him, and also a dog. So I have dogs, and my dogs have been really important the last few years. And also this character has a little spaniel. Mine's a spaniel cross too. So I have this little image of a spaniel on the cob at Lyme, sort of leaping in excitement as seagulls, which is a scene in the novel. And also flowers. So flowers are very important, the spring flowers, sort of whole optimism that comes with them. Yeah. So I've got some daffodils and things like that. And I may add some more as time goes on. I just haven't decided yet. Because I haven't finished the novel. I'm waiting to see what my editor says. I haven't decided what images I want yet.
Yeah. Well, that sounds really interesting, because it's useful to have a different way of thinking about a novel whilst you're working on it. And I keep telling my listeners, try to think of other ways to write, not just sit down at a typewriter, but there are other ways to bring across your ideas. That's obviously one way of doing it. So people can get hold of these by Etsy, can they?
Oh, yes, I have them. Yes, I'm selling them as prints. And again, they're on my website and on Etsy. So my Etsy name is Drawing the Line Studio. I've been selling a few already, which is nice. And also was very excited that Somerset Wildlife Trust accepted some for their online auction.
Wow.
So 4 prints of mine were sold and raised some money. And I felt that was just a sort of perfect kind of symmetry. So, nature gives to me, I create, and then I give what I create back to nature. So
That's
lovely. I felt so pleased about that.
That's lovely. That's a lovely way of explaining it. So how does your day work then? So tell me a bit about how you actually plan your days.
I every day is different, but I'm quite disciplined. So I'm always on top of what I need to submit, if that makes sense. So if Sam, my composer's waiting for some lyrics, I'm not late with them. But I do have many different jobs. So I have to juggle the work and all the admin for Jemima's Trust with the admin and the accounts I do for my husband. Plus, obviously, now we've got the drama back again. So there's all lots of little things, but I'm no longer in my shop. And I was in a friend's shop for a bit because I missed my own shop.
Doing any daily writing at all?
Not at the moment, because both current works in progress are with my editor. So not just Bird's Eye, but there's also another young adult standalone novel. So I'm in limbo. So that's why I am doing more linos. And I'm doing a lovely project, a lino cut project for a friend who's a theatre director, and she's going to be doing a play up at Porlock, I think it is. It's about Porlock. It's about the Louisa lifeboat. So she's going to be putting on a play, and I'm doing the poster for it. So at the moment, there's a lot of quite dark images on my Instagram because it was at night time. So it's this sort of lamp light and shadows and voices and so I'm working on that, which is really exciting.
Is there another book bursting to come out?
Not at the moment, because I'm being really, I'm being quite careful. I think I could easily rush into another one, but I know I've got a task ahead. I've got to finish Havisham, so I was working on that yesterday.
Yeah.
And I know I've got these other 2 novels that will be coming back in June. So I'm sort of conserving myself. I'm making little notes, as, because things are occurring to me. Oh, I should have done this, or I should have done that. So I'm making little notes to myself, but I'm not doing anything until I get feedback from my editor.
Which you might self-publish. Have you got the cover work done for that yet? The cover art?
No, nothing. And again, that'll all have to be done over time. And I probably won't do that myself. I mean, I might present a designer with my linos, the ones that are going inside, and say incorporate these in some way. But I would need a professional cover designer.
Yeah.
I have tried in the past to put stuff together, and it's a whole other skill.
Exactly. Yeah. How would people get in touch with you if they're interested in the Jemima Trust then?
Jemima Layzell Trust has got its own website, which is jemimalayzell.com.
Yeah.
And we also have our own Twitter and Facebook and Instagram accounts as well. And again, if you contact them, that's me.
Yeah. And people can find you on Amazon, because you mentioned Create Space before. Yes,
I think you can get my book through most outlets. Amazon's got the most sort of reviews on it. But if you look at Waterstones or bookshop.org, it's on there as well. And I can't remember, there's various other ones.
Did you want to name check your publishers?
The Book Guild.
Thank you.
So they're British. I think they've been going 30 years. They're based in Leicester.
So what else have you got planned then? So what's the rest of your year looking like?
Well, I'm taking it slowly. I'm obviously going to be doing the Havisham workshops, which are scheduled for August.
Yeah.
And I will be doing my rewrites over the summer for both working title Bird's Eye and this other novel. After August, I don't know what I'm going to be doing, but I will obviously be busy. I'm sure I will probably be beginning this self-publishing journey and ringing you up again saying, what was that you told me? So yes, I will. That's probably what I will be doing.
Cool. Would you be interested in coming back and having another interview when your next book is out, or when?
Oh yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, definitely.
Keep in touch. That'd be fantastic.
I really enjoyed it. It's very relaxed. I haven't felt like it was really an interview. It's felt more like a nice chat, actually.
General chit chat between two people who are interested in writing and stuff. Yeah. Well, it's been lovely to talk to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. You take care. Look after yourself.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.